So we're checking with Padma from Amgen. He was supposed to join as well too, but we won't. As soon as Thomas comes, we'll start anyway. And what I would suggest is that each person maybe just says their name and their company, and that way when someone's listening to this afterwards, they'll know whose voice is whose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can start. I'm Julie Bachmann from Boehringer Ingelheim.
Great, thank you. And why don't we go with the Metanomics team if you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, that's Nils Möller from Metanomics Health.
And Jochen Medtner, also from Metanomics Health from Berlin.
Then Henneke Kamp from BASF in Ludwigshafen.
And I'm Gina Montoya here with Henneke also.
Great, thank you. This is Dawn Van Dam. And Bjorn, are you back online? I don't see Thomas there yet.
Thomas has joined right now.
Yeah. Hi everybody. This is Thomas Stiggermann. Hi.
Hi, Thomas.
Well, DSEC.
And that was Bjorn who just said Thomas is here. We're just making sure we know everybody's voice before we get started.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so over to you at Metanomics.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Henneke will make the presentation today. I think we have two primary objectives today. I think finalization of the assessment of the reference compound based on Metanomics established patterns, and also final assessment of Metanomics patterns regarding to the blinded compound. This is the second key objective, and then we have, as we have agreed upon in Berlin in the summit, a couple of activities running for the pattern generation, where also Henneke will give you an update where we stand. There's a lot of things in progress, and we hope to get something promising out of it. However, at this point, we don't have yet all the data to make this final call on the pattern generation, but Henneke will explain a little bit different strategies we are taking to get closer to that.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, hello everybody. Good morning to the US. Good afternoon to Berlin and Biberach. So actually, these are the 4 points that I've put onto the agenda for today. First, I would like to go briefly through the refined data evaluation of the reference compounds, or I should say, going through the data evaluation after we've received the refined data into the database. You might remember that when we did have our summit in Berlin, that I told you that the quality check and the second upload of the data was due to come, and indeed it came 1 week or 2 weeks after the DSEC summit that we did have in Berlin. And there were, at least for one of the compounds, a few changes, but for most of them there were only very slight changes, so with not having any significant impact. Nevertheless, we did do the whole data evaluation for the 6 reference compounds and also for the 2 blinded compounds once again. And I've summarized that on a few slides for you today. Then we will comment a little bit on the status of the pattern generation, and also on the interpretation of the metabolic changes that we do see. if there's any question, if I'm too fast or too slow, just interrupt me and jump in and say whatever you have to comment. So, as a reminder, this is the table that I've already shown at the summit. This is the compounds that we have dosed through the studies, the 6 reference compounds here and the 2 blinded compounds. And you can see the high dose levels and the low dose levels that we've used, and also the administration route and the vehicle. I want to highlight again, because that's important later on when we go through the blinded compounds, that there are 2 treatments in here. The one is imatinib, the high dose, and also compound A, the high dose treatment, where we did have to reduce the dose level during the course of the study due to clinical findings that we did see. And as I said, that will become important again in a couple of minutes. The refined data evaluation showed for the reference compounds of cardiotoxicity that we have no really significant changes in the metabolome through that new data for 5 out of the 6 compounds. And these 5 are cyclophosphamide, doxorubicin, sunitinib, imatinib, and methoxystrone. So for these compounds, we gained a couple of significances, or we lost a couple of significances in terms of metabolite changes. But all in all, this did not change the pattern ranking, so we did check that again. And this did also not change the pairwise comparison. And there were also no striking new metabolites suddenly in the metabolome where we said, oh, wow, these are telling us a totally new story. So that basically the metabolome for these 5 compounds did not change much, and therefore also the evaluation did not change. We did see some more changes for bortezomib, so the number of significant metabolites was increased. So the data quality got better through the rework that we did upload. And this did also result in a few changes in the pattern ranking, actually. And I will show that on one slide where we have 2 pattern rankings compared to each other, the one before this rework and the one thereafter. However, that did not completely change the picture for bortezomib that we did see and that we did already present in April. What we did see also, that's kind of a pre-summary already. If we look at the effects that we do see in the clinical parameters and in the metabolome for the 6 reference compounds, these were confirmed after the upload of the new data, and these are still pretty much in line with the literature data that we have for these compounds. So these are basically the summary tables that you've seen already in April. So for cyclophosphamide and doxorubicin, that didn't change anything in the summary tables. The same is actually true for sunitinib and imatinib. So if you look into your files, these should look rather similar. There's actually one change for bortezomib. We did see some matches or we did see one match actually with a pattern related to kidney toxicity, kidney effects. And at that time, we did say we didn't find any literature for that. This is why the red cross is here in the table. However, after the rework, this match was not evident anymore. And you will see that on the next slide in a minute. And also for methoxystrone, the evaluation did not change as compared to what we've seen and discussed in April. And this is the one compound where I have to say that we were not that lucky with the Metanomics results, at least if you compare that to the clinical findings that we did have, because we did not find the effects on the blood system and also not on the liver function reflected in the metabolome changes. So that also did not change as compared to our discussion in April. On this slide, you do now see the pattern ranking for bortezomib, and this is actually the top 13 patterns, because this was the range or the part of the ranking where some few things did change. Everything that was below rank number 13 in that ranking, and which I've shown already in April, did not change at all. And you see here one column, which is the assessment as it looks like now, after the rework, and you see here beneath to it the column with the assessment that I've shown in April at the DSEC summit. And you can see that for some effects we have less confidence that there's something in there. Here you see that renal steroid synthesis inhibition, where we did have before the rework an equivocal finding. It's now a clear mismatch. The same is actually true for this pattern here related to nutrition. Before the rework we did have an equivocal finding here. After rework that's not even equivocal anymore, it's a clear mismatch. On the other hand side, we did lose also some weak matches. You can see that here. For example, some of the effects on the liver that we did identify as a weak match now have to be judged as equivocal. And the same is true here down at the bottom part for the kidney tubular effect. This is the one I referred to on this previous slide. And we did also gain one weak match. This is shown here. The pattern related to reduced feed consumption, which is now, instead of being equivocal, more towards the weak match. This is just to the fact that one significance was added to that profile in this respect. However, this is not in line with the observations from the clinical parameters, so the food consumption was not significantly changed. There was a slight decrease, but that was not significant during the course of the study. Overall, I would say the assessment for bortezomib concerning the pattern ranking in terms of identification of possible target organs or possible mode of actions did not significantly change. And also the pairwise comparison, I have no slide on that because it's rather similar, did not change. So the rank of order of the Metanomics tox compounds as compared to bortezomib on the basis of the complete profile is the same. Bringing that further to oh, sorry, I just hit Gina here under my
No
desk.
problem.
To bring that forward to the blinded compounds, through the new data, there were also no significant changes, overall changes in the metabolome for the two blinded compounds. However, I would like to spend some time at least on compound A and a little time on compound B, because we, of course, after the DSEC summit and getting to know what compounds these were, it was very interesting for us to see whether we could gain a bit more information out of the data. And this is, again, the summary table that I've shown in April. And we learned that compound A was actually chlorpromazine. I will refer to that on the next slide. And compound B was the glucocorticoid, if I remember correctly, provided by Bayer. And the interesting thing with chlorpromazine was that we already did have that in the database. And I've shown the data, the study design data for the two chlorpromazines here on that slide. So our compound A, chlorpromazine hydrochloride, I should have added that here, was originally dosed with 5 and 1.5 mg per kg. The dosing was done intraperitoneally, and the vehicle was saline. And due to some clinical findings, which nowadays I would interpret as the, let's say, neuropharmacological effects of chlorpromazine, we did reduce the dose level to 2.5 after 2 weeks, 13 days it was, I guess. And at that time, we said, okay, here are some signs coming up there. There's a time course in terms of strength of effect, and we didn't want to lose the animals of that study group at that time, and therefore we said we want to reduce that dose level. Actually, when we go to the database and look at one of the older studies, it was the 34th study actually, when we did dose with chlorpromazine. We did do that with 10 and 2 milligram per kilogram body weight, again, intraperitoneally, and with ionized water as a vehicle. So there's a slight difference between these two, but also we did have chlorpromazine hydrochloride, obviously from a different batch, but basically our files, it was also highly pure chlorpromazine hydrochloride used in that study. So I guess from the compound, it was pretty much comparable. the administration route was comparable. The only real difference was the dose levels that we did choose. And of course, we were a bit uneasy learning that we did have chlorpromazine as the compound A, and did not find any matches with our chlorpromazine. However, and in fact, we did look at the complete profiles. The metabolome changes induced by these two treatments is not really comparable, or they are not really comparable. However, interestingly, in the profile comparison for compound A, although we have no matches above our threshold, for which we say this is now really a match in this statistical correlation analysis, the first rank actually was chlorpromazine from MOA 34 from that particular study, at least for the female animals. I did forget to add that information here. For the males, it's not that nice. But this was something where I said, okay, maybe there is something in there. However, I have to highlight this correlation coefficient of 0.4. You might remember from our discussion in April that I told you that the threshold for female animals is 0.6, around 0.6, which we have to really call it a real match in this correlation analysis. But still, there's no compound in the whole database which ranks higher than the chlorpromazine for the female animals. However, what we can also see on this slide already, here you see the column on profile strength, and we've discussed that briefly during our April meeting too. This number gives a view on how pronounced the effects on the metabolome are, and we've discussed in April that the usual profile strengths that we do see are between 0.5, this is the lowest number that we have, and somewhere around, let's say, 2.53. This is the more strong compounds, and the strongest effects lead to a profile strength of around 4.5. So what you can take from that number, that for our compound A, the effect on the metabolome is really, really weak. 0.7 as compared to the lowest numbers that we have in the database of 0.5, that's not a real difference. And you can also see that for the chlorpromazine, that stems from our earlier study here, with a higher dose level, we see at least a little bit stronger effect on the metabolome. Actually, we took this as a lever to also look into the chlorpromazine of the MOA 34 a bit deeper. So we did do the pattern ranking, and we did find a few matches in the patterns, and these were well described in the literature. So obviously, at least for chlorpromazine, we are able to detect some of the effects. However, I guess that for the compound A treatment or the chlorpromazine treatment within the context of our study, the dose level was just too low. However, we've done something here. Here you can see a few of the changes of our older chlorpromazine treatment as compared to the compound A, and we've highlighted a few metabolites which we could maybe connect to the activities of chlorpromazine. And just to explain what you do see in the table, here on the left-hand side, obviously you have a list of metabolites, 20 or 25 metabolites or so, which we selected, and you have here a block of numbers which represent the compound A treatment. So that's chlorpromazine, the run in our DSEC studies with 5 or after 2 weeks 2.5 mg per kilogram body weight. And here on the right-hand side, you have a block of numbers displaying our original chlorpromazine that was run years ago with a 10 milligram per kilogram body weight. And actually, Gina did do a very nice job in digging a bit into the literature of chlorpromazine, and actually she found that related to the chlorpromazine activity as being an MDA receptor ligand, I would put it that way, dose dependently leading to different effects. But there should be something on for example, glutamate, glycine, aspartate. So that's been described in the literature, and you can see that at least for the male animals here, we have some of these changes apparent. So here's the glutamate here again. So that's 2 measurements of the same metabolite. We have the some increases here in the glycine, not that pronounced in the aspartate. And interestingly, if you now look to the left-hand side, where you can see the compound A, at least some of the changes are also apparent there. In most cases, the significance is missing. This is now speculation, I have to admit that. This is really playing around with the data a little bit, but we wanted to clarify whether there's at least something in the data for compound A and chlorpromazine or not. So do not take this as a firm, yeah, we have identified pharmacological activity here. That's really playing with the data a little bit. Then we have well, a mixed activity of chlorpromazine on a couple of dopamine receptors, and this lead to changes in serotonin, noradrenaline, adrenaline, and you can see these changes below here. Especially for noradrenaline and adrenaline, at least, we see some quite consistent changes for the 10 mg per kg chlorpromazine. And if, again, you go to the left-hand side, you see some increased numbers, a few which are significant. Here are some which are not significant, but you see also some decreased numbers here. So, again, there might be something in there, and this might, for example, drive the statistical correlation analysis a little bit, but this is, again, not really strong. So from that perspective, also playing with data, but not a real match between the two. And also we do see some effects on the single myelins here that has also been described, that chlorpromazine does act as on an enzyme that's called phiasma. I've never heard that before. It's functional inhibitor of acetylsphingomyelinase, so it does block the conversion from sphingomyelins to sphingosines and ceramides, and this is at least a little bit reflected here in the increases of these sphingomyelins for chlorpromazine. And this is then an example where we don't see any real match with those changes that were induced by the 5 or 2.5 mg per kilogram treatment with the compound A. So this is, yeah, I would say maybe there's something in there for these two treatments, but I cannot really say that this is a match. So the bottom line of this comparison would be that the two treatments, and may just be because of the different dose levels, are metabolically or on a metabolome level somewhat different from each other. Okay, we did also look into the compound B again, and as I've said before, there were no real changes in the metabolome, and therewith, unfortunately, also no real changes in our evaluation as compared to the April meeting. And I think here we do come back to the point that obviously we missed to use the right administration route, and this, since we've done this as a gavage treatment orally, of course, in corn oil, and did not inject the animals as should have been. So I guess that's just a matter of different bioavailability through the different routes, and we've briefly discussed that. So unfortunately, I have no real changes to report on concerning the compound B after the data evaluation. And I guess from our clinical chemistry parameters, but that's something that we've discussed already in April, there are some changes which are in line with what you've seen at your labs at Bayer, but again, it is not strong enough to conclude something sound here. So unfortunately, for this compound, the situation of the story did not change as discussed in our April meeting.
And again, Thomas, yeah. Speaking here, I can't remember precisely what we discussed in the Berlin meeting, but we were quite interested in some indications of pharmacodynamics. You remember that I said, okay, this looks a little bit like a glucocorticoid. Now, maybe I'm mistaken, but didn't we say that you also wanted to look into the database to see whether there are similar compounds with regard to mode of action? Because with regard to toxicological effects, I agree, we shouldn't spend a lot of time, since evidently, the exposure was just too low.
Yeah. Actually, Thomas, you are quite right. and I just recognized that we missed something here in our evaluation. So actually, to be honest, we did not really look into that. That is something that we still have to do. I'm sorry for that.
No problem. I'm happy that I recall correctly.
Yeah, I just have to take a note. Yeah. No, I'm really sorry that was missed.
No problem. Don't worry.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then, nevertheless, since we are still in the work and in some of the processes, I would like to give you a little status update. And this is, I can start with that already, because concerning the activities or the changes that we did see here for these reference compounds, we looked into that. And Gina has just finalized today actually a closer evaluation of the catecholamines. We weren't able to really discuss that before this meeting, so this is something to be prepared in form of a couple of slides. But since these compounds are thought to do something on the heart and maybe secondarily something on the cardiovascular system, we thought and discussed that in April to look into these data. So that's ongoing. We also did work further on the patterns, so we tried different approaches to come up with patterns. I have to admit that as compared to what we've shown in April, the situation of the story did not really improve. Irrespective of what route you take to define a pattern, you end up at a certain level of yeah, there's something in there. You do find some compounds which are correct, but you do not find all of them, and you do find a few others which are not matching really. So as compared to the few 5, 6, 7 patterns that, or approaches towards a pattern, I should name it that way, that we've discussed in April, there are a few more, but this also did not really change. And what we are just doing is to put together a group of animals, irrespective of the treatment and the dose group, for those that did show histopathologically some effects. So that was basically 4 animals of the imatinib high dose group and 1 animal of the low dose group, and there was one further animal that did show heart effects, heart weight effects, and we conclude this as one treatment group, knowing that this is different dose levels. But we want to start from that to work further with a different approach on the patterns. This is something that the Berlin colleagues are currently doing. They have to put that by hand, unfortunately. There's no automatism to take animals from different dose groups in our database and put them together. So I will get that during the course of this week, I guess, and then we will work further on that. I should switch the slides anyway here. So that's a bit the bullet point you can see here on the bottom of the slide. Actually, what we also have done is that we compiled all the metabolites that we've identified in these close to pattern profiles, and we've analyzed or tried to analyze how often metabolites are there, how important they might be, how consistently they are changed. And this is something where we just started discussion with the colleagues in Berlin and to relate that to their experience in other heart-related projects. We've referred to the chronic heart failure project already when we discussed in Berlin that it might be worthwhile to look into those data and to compare that. And this is also currently ongoing. So that's the bottom part here. Then let's go to the upper part of the slide. We have initiated measurements. Sorry? Was there a question? Obviously not. Okay. So we've initiated the measurement of the one cardiomyopathy marker, NT-proBNP. So this will be run here internally. Then Björn has, or Thomas, or both of you have suggested a company, Singulex in the US, I guess they are placed, where you do some of your measurements, and actually we've established the contact to them and are currently discussing with them what we can do there, how the prices are. And actually, the good news is that we still have enough material. They use surprisingly low amounts of plasma for their measurements, so we have enough material to do that in addition to what we've measured so far. And again, the objective here would be to define groups of animals that are affected. So over all the 6 reference compounds, I would like to see that we have a few animals that we did miss so far in terms of histological results, where we do see some starting effect or so with these plasma parameters. And again, I would compile these as one group and use them to establish a pattern, try to establish a pattern. The rationale behind that, and I have to share that part of the discussion with you, is the following. And we've touched upon that already in April, but as I said, it was confirmed that when we start building a pattern, we can mature that to a certain level, but not beyond that. And irrespective of where we start, I have the impression that we, at a certain point in development of these patterns, we hit a wall and we cannot cross that. And one idea that I have in mind, that if we start with the compounds, even with those where we do see some effects in troponin I or with the histopathology, in every case there are a few animals that show an effect and others that don't. So with that, I would hypothesize that the effects, the metabolome effects induced by the heart effects, or let's say secondarily reflecting the heart effects, are diluted somewhat. And this is the rationale why I say, okay, I want to focus on those animals that do really show with these classical parameters an effect, and see whether we can bring that a step forward or maybe cross the wall if you only concentrate on those where really a change should be. And into the same direction goes something that we also started to discuss in April already, and this is to do additional histopathological evaluations for those compounds that we have in the database, like the chlorpromazine MOA from the MOA study 34, where we did fix and preserve the organs which are still in our archives. And secondly, also to look into electron microscopy for the specimens that we still do have from these 6 reference compounds. We have a little issue here in terms of the timing, I have to admit. We are pretty much blocked in the moment in our histopathology, so such measurements would be possible in August this year. So the data would be there. That would actually start with the technical processing of the material, so the data would be there only in late summer. And this is why we said, okay, we currently put that on hold. We have no urgency here to slot that into the lab. We still have the opportunity in August. And wait for the clinical parameters, so basically the NT-proBNP and maybe the results from singulates if we decide to use them also. And first work with these groups then, and on the basis of that data decide whether it is really worthwhile to spend significant resources into the electron microscopy especially, because that's not that cheap actually, even at BASF. Okay. So that's actually the status concerning the ongoing work, and I guess if I know my slides correctly, yes, this leads me to a summary slide where I can say that for the 6 reference compounds, we do see some nice effects, at least for 5 out of the 6 compounds. We did also confirm these effects against literature or against data that we received from you during the discussions. Metoxantrone was a bit an exception from that, and I've reflected to that when I showed the summary tables. So the metabolome results are somewhat weak here for the metoxantrone, so that was not an optimal finding, but that's how the data do look like. For the blinded compounds, we still can only conclude that we've basically no effect induced in our studies here, so we didn't see any changes in the clinical chemistry or in the histopathology. Besides these nowadays I call them neuropharmacological effects of compound A, and we also had hardly any effect on the metabolome, so only very few metabolites changed, and also basically no real matches, I should say, with the database. And as I've said just before, the pattern generation is ongoing. We are doing these additional plasma measurements. Based on that, we might consider doing some additional histopathology or electron microscopy on the specimens that we do have. And the data interpretation is running, and we are all working on that. And with that said, I guess I only have the backup, and this is basically some more detailed slides on compound A and compound B, which I've shown in April, so that did not change. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Great. Thanks, Hanneke. That was terrific. I'm just thinking that maybe we could go back to slide 14 and where you have your next steps, and maybe we could have a little bit of a conversation about each of your bullet points, if that's okay.
Of course, yes.
So maybe just on the investigation of classical parameters, any feedback from Thomas, Bjorn, Julie about this first point?
No, for me, Bjorn speaking, everything makes sense. So and also to correlate metabolic changes to other phenotyping markers, NT-proBNP or maybe troponin I from measured by Singulex, very sensitive. So for me, it makes sense. So, and I acknowledge the efforts you would like to take and apply electron microscopy and so on. So it's good to hear.
Yeah, I fully concur with Bjorn. From my side, there is nothing to add. It's nicely stated.
Yeah.
Actually, I have to admit. Sorry, Julie.
Yeah. I just want to say, I just agree as well. I think it's a very good idea also to measure troponin and proBNP, and kind of to add this as information that we can have along with the metabolomics.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah, and actually, I'm really keen to see the data because I'm still convinced that there's something in the data. It's not nonsense that we do see, but it's not. For me, it's not confirming enough or not strong enough to say, yeah, we have that already. So I'm really looking forward to have these results and work from that, because I think that this has something to do with dilution of the metabolome effects. Maybe I'm proven wrong at the end, but I will, unless I've tried it, I will not refuse. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also a good idea, maybe if we go one step further and just have in the end a very good comparison of a lot of different parameters. I mean, that's rarely done systematically, to have kind of a big mix of all those endpoints measured, basically, new endpoints, you can say. So.
Okay, great. And so how about on point number 2? We could just go around again, Bjorn, Thomas, and Julie, your thoughts on the additional histopathology electron microscopy.
Yeah, I think Bjorn has nicely summarized it. So let's see I would say let's see what we get out of that from the next steps, and then have a discussion on what to do further in that respect. As I said, especially if you wanted to go into the electron microscopy, I would say this should be done, let's say, at least somewhat carefully, not for those animals where we are quite sure that we have an effect, and also not for those where we say it's highly unlikely to see anything, because that's really an expensive part. But also concerning some additional histopathology for some more compounds, that might make sense if they pop up during the process of the pattern generation. And this is something which we really look into as soon as we can define these new groups.
Okay, and any other further comments on your last point, the pattern generation, from anyone?
Thomas speaking here. It's straightforward. There is, again, not very much to add. Yeah.
Okay, great. Just wanted to check.
Also in previous exercises where we did gene expression analysis, we did the same thing. If we couldn't get an overall pattern, we went back to those parameters where the animals were positive in the classical endpoints and then looked again. So yeah, it's a meaningful procedure.
Yeah, of course, now after this discussion, we have to add here to the next steps to look into the database whether we have some compounds which share the same pharmacology as your compound B. That's noted, so it will not be forgotten anymore.
To drill a little bit deeper, I do not know whether you have glucocorticoids in your database or corticosteroids in general, but maybe one can pick out a couple of selected metabolites where we already have discussed. I can't remember precisely what it actually was, but you remember that I was a little bit struck. Oh wow, this is interesting. After Björn released what the compound actually is, that one could select a set of 5 to 10 metabolites, and then go back and see whether with this procedure one could find nearest neighbors which would actually then match pharmacology-wise.
I like that idea, Thomas. I would do it as a two-step process. Give us a little time to first look into that. I should say unbiased in terms of the metabolite selection, and see whether we find any common changes. And maybe if we are lucky, or if everything runs fine, then these are anyway the ones that you already know. If not, we can have anyway a specific look into those. So I really like that idea, and let's do that as a two-step process.
Henning, I am fully concurrent with regard to time. We are absolutely not under pressure. So whether it's in 4 weeks or 6 weeks, I mean, essentially the point is now we can pull out the maximum science-wise, and there is no project ongoing where we desperately expect that. So take the time you need.
Thank you.
So any other thoughts from the team? I'm not looking to necessarily add more work, but just, is there anything else that anyone wants to mention or talk about or suggest? Because it sounds like what we're doing here is giving you, Henneke, some more time and the team to do some more work. And then perhaps, I don't know, are we looking at September to get back together again and talk about what we find, or what do people think?
Yeah, actually, I can comment on that immediately. Maybe it would be good to have another telco somewhere beginning to mid of August, because I do expect that in July we have the plasma parameters measured, and with that, from that onwards, maybe with 2 or 3 weeks time, we can have a first idea how this looks like in terms of patterns. And I guess it makes sense to have a discussion then to see what conclusions or what maybe next steps we drive from that analysis.
Yeah, Henneke, I fully concur with that. And actually, I would propose that you trigger the time when you think it's appropriate to have another discussion, because it's only you who can judge whether sufficient data is collected, which would make it worthwhile. And as I said, we are not under time pressure. So whether it's in August or September, we just have to find a common date, and you can actually trigger that.
Yeah, actually, my suggestion would be to get back to all of you with a proposal as soon as I know the definitive delivery of the data from the classical parameters. This is planned, and it should be there in July, but I've not seen the amendment to the study plan yet. So let's wait for that, and as soon as I know when I will get the data, I can propose a date.
Perfect.
Okay.
Good idea.
Okay.
All right.
Super. So is there anything else that we need to cover off at this point in time, do you think?
Not from our side.
Okay. Maybe what it would be good, though, is, Henneke, maybe what we could do is give Jeff a chance from Amgen to listen to this, and then we could just have a small conversation with us and yourself and himself, just so that we can make sure that if he has any additional thoughts, we've included those.
Yes, of course, of course.
So we'll schedule something with him, let's say maybe in a week and a half, or we'll check with him and see how quickly he'll be able to listen to the recording.
Yeah, great. Sounds good.
Super. Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for your participation today. If there's anything that you think about after the fact, feel free to send us an email and we'll share it with the group. But I think this is a great, further step in looking at what we have here and getting everybody's input and trying to understand how we can move forward. So I appreciate everyone's feedback and participation today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for setting this up.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.